Welcome to AgriMinds, the podcast where we explore the intersections of personal growth and professional success in the ag industry. I'm Kacee, your host. Thank you for joining me as we dive in to the different strategies and insights that will help you level up your life and career. From mental health to leadership development, we're going to cover it all. So sit back and get ready to grow with AgriMinds.
Well, today I've got special guest Natalie Kovarik with me today. She is somebody that I have followed on social media for what seems like years and has had an absolutely fascinating story, both in the agriculture industry and stepping into a couple other areas. So welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. I would love for you to just share a little bit about who you are and some of the things that you're into. And I think you'll obviously do a much better job of explaining it than me. So just share with everybody a little bit about yourself and what you're into.
Sure. So I grew up in agriculture. I grew up in Southwest Montana. I did get my degree in pharmacy. And so when I graduated from college, I didn't come back to the family ranch and I really had no intentions. So to look kind of where I am now in my life and what I'm doing now is very unexpected, I think, for myself and just a lot of people that were, around my life earlier on. I ended up meeting my husband at our family bull sale, and that's kind of how I ended up down the path I am now. He is from Nebraska and he ranches. And so when we got married, I relocated here and together we run a cow-calf operation down here and we're growing a registered herd. And then I'm sure we'll get into this, but one of the big things I do besides being on the ranch is sharing online. And so I have built kind of a community around that and then also businesses around that. And so it's kind of, I guess, an interesting time for us to be alive when that can be your job.
Oh, I love it. And that's something that I want to dive into is diversifying that income stream, because I think that's something that a lot of people are looking to do, especially the members of AgriMinds, is maybe I've done this same job for the past 11 years and I'm just ready for something new, or what's happening on the farm is not necessarily cutting it anymore. And I need to get creative and figure out how I can, like I said, add an additional income stream or just do something to supplement. And so walk us through how the heck that even started.
Yeah. So when I moved down here, we're outside of a town about 2000 and we're fairly rural. We're about an hour and a half from like a Walmart or a Target. And so I could have worked as a pharmacist in one of those bigger cities, but I didn't want to commute. I guess essentially we knew we were going to be like adding to our family and it just didn't make sense for me to take on that job with traveling, knowing that I'd eventually probably scale back from it. And there are opportunities for me to work as a pharmacist in the town we live outside of. But as you can imagine, in a town in 2000, like turnover wasn't exactly rapid. And so I was kind of found myself in this position when I moved that I needed something to do. And I know that sounds so silly, but I believe there will probably be someone tuning in with a similar personality type. Since I've gone down the path of personal development, I have learned a lot about myself. And looking back now, it makes a lot of sense from just things in my past and upbringing and just the way I'm built that I would have felt the need to really do something. Like I couldn't have just been content being a ranch wife, hanging out with my husband and helping on the ranch. And so I had this harebrained idea with a friend back in Montana to start direct-to-consumer beef business. And that is really where this whole journey started for me. We knew that if we were going to sell beef online, we would need connection points, right? Like you're not going to get strangers to buy food from strangers. And so we used Instagram. We had both been on that platform. It had been a long time since I'd been on Facebook, and really none of the other platforms were really developed. I guess YouTube was, but it didn't make sense for us to have a one-on-one relationship and, promote our products through YouTube. And so essentially it was Instagram. I did that for about 2 years, and we can kind of get more into the weeds of, the transition and everything. But essentially after 2 years of the direct to consumer business, I ended up pivoting over to what I do now, which is basically creating a personal brand and just monetizing and sharing online, more focused on my family and our operation.
There are so many people who are stepping into that. And I think it's mostly because you have helped pave the way.
Oh, jeez.
I'm
That
serious.
is a big statement, but thank you.
I mean, it's so cool to see, like, when I think back like 10 years ago on our family farm, I never would have thought about, I'm going to video myself and show other people what I'm up to. Like, it never even crossed my mind. And I've seen more and more people in the agriculture industry advocate for the industry because they're showing, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm not actually doing the things that the majority of people outside of ag think we're doing. And, not only is it an advocacy, but it is showing, like a behind the scenes, and so many people are into that, but also we're educating other people within the industry of like, here's how we can work smarter and not necessarily harder, but we're still working the same probably, but more efficiently and doing things that are like, oh, I've never thought about doing it in that way, or here's how I can really optimize the things I'm already doing. And one of the things that we're going to be covering in the AgriMinds program is this thing called Working Genius. And I talk about this a lot as well, but just in case this is the very first episode anybody's ever tuned into on AgriMinds, Working Genius is an assessment that helps us understand what our God-given strengths and talents are and how we can utilize them and put them in the most efficient place, and how to read those around us so that way we're like really tapping into their strengths too. Talk to me a little bit about how, like, I think there was an episode on your podcast where you talked about like, my husband likes to do this part and I like to do that part. Tell me a little bit about how you kind of found your role, and do you outsource any other pieces of your business now?
Yeah, I think that is so amazing that you incorporate that into the AgriMinds, because I feel like that is something that has actually helped me tremendously and has set me up for some of the success I've had, is really understanding my strengths, how to be a leader, how to work with other people, and really almost, I guess, highlight and work off of their strengths as well, and really understanding those things about ourselves. I know personal development for some is kind of just this weird woo-woo thing, but I really believe that some of those things are at the root of success. And the better you understand them, the better you're setting yourself and your family up. It's interesting that you talked about kind of, two different communities, right? You have the community that follows you online that is not really in agriculture at all, removed. And then you have the community that follows you that is, your industry allies, essentially. And that is one thing I noticed on our YouTube channel, because we did have, I don't really share on YouTube anymore, but we did have a period where, YouTube was a main platform for us. And that's kind of what you're referring to when you say, my husband likes to do this and I like to do something else. And when I came to him and approached him about starting a YouTube channel, he was on board, but he's never been the one to take the reins with social media. He's always really supported me. And if I've ever asked him to do something, he's always done it, but he's never like bringing ideas to me, or, it's not like, I guess it wasn't a 50-50. It was definitely me kind of taking the reins and leading. And one thing I noticed when we were doing our YouTube is every time I had put the camera on him, he would really just talk at a very high cattle level. And I realized I was never going to get him to dumb it down or talk in a different way. And if I did, it would be very unauthentic for him. And so I finally just decided, okay, I'll let him talk that way. And then I'll kind of be the mediator. And I will ask the dumb questions or the obvious questions and the easy questions so that anyone that isn't at Luke's level, would understand what is going on. Like, we didn't want to leave this community I knew we had watching. I didn't want to leave them behind. And looking back, I actually think that is why our YouTube did so well. We had, I would say, more in the industry watch us on YouTube than outside of the industry. And I really think it was because they enjoyed hearing Luke talk the way he did, and they enjoyed seeing what we were doing on our operation. I'm obviously biased, but I think my husband is wildly intelligent and does some very good things on our operation. And I'm just so thankful I didn't try and change that about him. And instead I played off that strength, because I really believe that is what made our YouTube so successful, was letting Luke, shine in the way he was and utilize his strengths in that way. And then me just kind of filling in the gaps around him.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like I had to adjust who I was a lot of the times on our family farm. So we're primarily row crops, and we spent a lot of times doing all the things. Like, I remember growing up and helping my dad and my grandpa, and he's like, okay, not only do you need to help me work on the equipment, we're going to go out and apply the chemicals and the fertilizer, but then you're also going to go in and help grandma with the books. And then you're going to also go with us to the bank and visit our landlords. And it's like, I got to see a lot of areas, but I can remember looking back and saying, I really enjoyed doing these things more than I did those things. And, I always thought, well, maybe I'm just terrible at the books. Like, I suck at math, and I will own that. but I can spell, and I have the creative brain, and I have the artsy fartsy brain, and I can get really, creative on that side. But if you ask me to like do math and logistics, like I always thought I was really stupid. And so like when I was helping my dad, figure out like ratios and rates on like, do we do this here? We do that here. And, what kind of level do we apply at this rate, and blah, 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 blah. I always felt just really stupid. And I just never got it. And even today, I'm still like, why do I not understand? I have a legitimate degree in agriculture business economics, and there's parts that I don't understand, and I will never get it. But then like you look at my husband, who is very so like into math, he can whip up a formula in no time, and I'm over here like, I don't know how you do it. But he cannot spell for nothing, and he can't get creative, and he doesn't have the strength to come up with different ideas or different approaches or think about what the end result could be in possible scenarios. Like that is so difficult for him to do. And so I just see that playing out in our farm today. And now that I have a language around it, and now that I'm like more self-aware of this is what I'm really good at, and I can't expect everybody to be as good at that as I am. But then same thing, like other people can't expect me to be great at these other things, knowing like that will just never happen. And so we've given ourselves a little bit of grace on that, because it's like, okay, that's just not my strength, and I'm okay with that now. And I love that, you kind of dove into that personal self-awareness. And I remember a couple of years ago, somebody posting something on Twitter, and they're like, hey, I'm looking for new book recommendations. And then they put in parentheses, nothing self-help or self-development. Because like, they're like, I don't want to read that stuff. It's boring to me. And I'm like, that is the most fascinating stuff to me. Like, don't get me wrong, I love reading books that are made up, but I also love like factual, like this is like our brain, and this is, how we think and do and feel. And I think that's fascinating. Why wouldn't you want to know more about yourself?
Yeah,
And
I love
now
it.
that oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love that you use the word self-awareness, because I really think that's kind of at the beginning stages of what personal development is. You really have to honestly be self-aware and open to that, to have any personal development. And those books, like you said, they're some of my favorite too. They're actually part of my daily habits, is to read a self-help book. And I remember reading one that, usually I do like mini daily readers. And I remember reading one that was talking about how intuitively we always think that if, the strengths that we don't have, if we work better at those, we'll be stronger, because we'll bring our strengths up and then we'll be more level. And I remember this one that was talking about, don't do that. Actually just focus on what your actual strength is, and then outsource and find the other people to do the things that you're not good at, instead of trying to become good at something you aren't, because you're going to be able to hone a skill that you are naturally good at and enjoy doing much better and much quicker than you are going to try and hone a skill that you suck at and you don't enjoy. And it just made so much sense to me. And I think ever since I read literally that, like 2-minute read, probably a couple paragraphs, I've really intentionally brought that into my life, whether it's personal or professional, because I just think it makes so much more sense to really hone the things you're good at and then fill in the rest with other people if you can.
Oh, I like that. That reminds me of, so the Working Genius podcast had an episode where they were talking about like, so the Working Genius, you have 2 geniuses, 2 competencies, and 2 frustrations. And everybody always says like, well, should I try to sharpen my skills when it comes to my frustrations? Like, should I focus on those, knowing I'm good at these other things? Should I go in and focus on the stuff that gets me frustrated so I can be better at them? And they're like, if you want to, you can, because there's definitely roles where you're going to have to do all 6 types of Working Genius, but it's not something that I think you need to go do. It's something that it's great to be aware of, because you cannot have that guilt and that shame associated with it, knowing this isn't something I'm great at, it's not something I enjoy, and I can outsource it. And I think a lot of farmers and ranchers and most people who work in a like physical labor type of role don't necessarily want to admit that, because it may show weakness, or it may show like that same stigma. If we use self-help, does that mean that we're struggling or not capable, or there's something wrong with us? And it's like, that is absolutely not the thing. That's just you knowing so much about yourself that it's like, I can really shine on the things that I'm great at, And I'm not even going to stress about the things that I'm not, because somebody else is really great at that. And if I try to do all the things, I may be depriving another teammate of mine or somebody that's on the family farm of doing the thing that they're really great at. So not only am I stressing myself out, but I'm depriving them of shining the light on the thing that they're great at.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the other side of the coin that can be hard when it comes to this conversation is that sometimes, whether it's, on the operation or in a business, you're sometimes at the level of like bootstrapping where you do have to do it all and you don't have the financial means to do that outsource. And so you are kind of required to fill in roles you don't want to. But I always think if you can like push through that stage until you can add in the help, or you can stop doing something on the operation or hire someone, or, again, within your business, then you could focus on your strengths and look to fill, employment roles in areas that you're not strong in.
Yeah. And I think that we covered that I think it was either Callie or Katrina's episode, which was a couple episodes back. And we talked about that same thing. It's like, it just may not make sense for you to outsource. Maybe you financially can't afford it. Maybe the resources aren't there. If you live in the middle of nowhere, your options are very limited. And so we talked through like, well, what do I do then? If I can't outsource something and I still have to do all this stuff and know that there's only a certain amount of stuff that I'm really good at and the rest of it I don't like, what do I do? And the answer to that was, at least you're self-aware enough to know, so that way you don't have that pressure and expectation to be great at it. You can give yourself that grace and know, okay, I have to push through it now, but one of my goals that I'm going to work towards is to eventually save up enough money or put the processes in place to get to a point where I can outsource that. I can start having those conversations with people that are in my group. Maybe it's a very small circle, but I can at least start having those conversations and say, this is where I'm, not necessarily shining as bright as I would like to. Who do we know that can either volunteer or help me through this for this particular season? And then, I'm going to work towards hiring somebody full-time for that.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
exactly. It's fascinating. It's so good. Okay, we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, which is, it's fine. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing today. So you started off like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to move into that. And so where are you at today with everything?
Yep. So 2 years ago now, I think I officially, quote unquote, retired from pharmacy. I fill in town if they ever need a pharmacist, if they're sick or maternity leave or vacation leave like that, they know they can call me and I will fill in, but I am no longer leaving the operation for an off the ranch job, which is really nice. So most of my days, we do have littles. So most of my days are mothering them and then taking along with Luke on the ranch. I am not like an official employee where duties on the ranch are required of me. And if I don't get them done, they will not be done, which is a very, very nice place to be in, because I can kind of choose to go with Luke when, the littles allow it, and still be a part of our operation in that way. But if, weather dependent or mood dependent or whatever it is, I don't actually have to go and do a role on the ranch, our actual operation. As far as social media, I spend a majority of my time for our podcast, Discover Ag, which I co-host with my partner, Tara Vanderdusen, and then majority of my time on a couple different social platforms. Because that is essentially how I bring money to our family, is through monetizing social media.
Okay, can we talk about that a little bit more, on how you're able to balance all of that? And the reason why I'm asking is because I think a lot of people, myself included, are trying to find our place. Like, we're maybe a parent that wants to stay home, but like, we also still want to bring in an income. And how do we balance our 9-to-5 job plus being flexible with our kiddos? And it's just not feasible for everybody. I was super blessed to be able to have that opportunity and still earn an income, but still have that flexibility to be there with my kids when they need me. But can we dive into that a little bit more, of like how you were able to make that happen and what that balance looks like for you?
Yeah. So one of my favorite sayings is, clarity comes through action. I think you can think about a plan and implement a plan and try and create a plan, and then you go to do the plan and you end up changing it anyway, because through movement and through action, you just realize things are different. And I feel like looking back, that is how I got to the place now where I feel like things work. It was really just by starting somewhere and then moving the pieces as I went, which is definitely a personality trait for me. I am a build your ship at sea kind of girl. And I know not everyone is as fluid, and I guess maybe relaxed about things as that, but that is what has worked for me. My husband and I had gotten to a point where what I was doing on social media, I felt like I couldn't grow it or do anything more if I didn't leave my pharmacy job. It was just getting too much for me to do everything. And I had felt the call to lean into the social media and grow that more than I had the call to stay at my, 9 to 5. My husband, when I brought that up to him, he was a little reluctant, as anyone in agriculture would. He really liked the idea of a steady paycheck that did not depend on whether a brand wanted to work with us or someone sat down and watched our videos or whatever, the means of income was. So he was a little hesitant. I think we had the conversations around like July or August maybe. And essentially we had decided that I would stay the rest of the year, through December at my job. And then maybe at the beginning of the year, we would talk to my boss and see what it would look like for me to step back. And we would just look at like maybe what the year was for my financials from online and kind of just assess everything at the end of the year. An opportunity came up with my boss organically, kind of about me stepping away or not working pharmacy in, I think, like October. So it was like 2 months earlier than Luke and I had ever planned about even assessing about whether I would quit or not. And I honestly just took the conversation and ran with it and ended up quitting. And so I left my boss's office and I texted my husband and I said, I know this was not part of the plan, but I just quit my job today. And he was he was very, very supportive. Luke is a phenomenal husband and he's kind of the same as me. And he's very laxed and like, okay, we'll figure it out. And so I just kind of dove in. Like I said, I knew I couldn't get further with what I wanted to do unless I made that change. And I just didn't see an opportunity of how I could keep going the way I was. And it was definitely scary, but I was very confident in myself that what I could see that I wanted to create and the way I knew I could bring in money, I knew I could do it. And so I think that self-confidence really played a very large role as well in stepping away from like my quote unquote, 9 to 5 job. Once I started, not having to go to the pharmacy anymore, again, just through figuring things out, Luke and I were able to figure out what would work for us as a marriage, us as parents, us as owners of our ranch, and me as a business owner for this online business. Probably looking back, if I look at how much time I was spending in all the different areas, it has drastically changed in percentages and amounts of how I do it now. But I only figure that out through just, again, starting, so we started with, we kept the kids being watched by someone the 2 days that I was usually going to the pharmacy. We kept that so that I could have, quote unquote, those be my work days for social media. That did not work. I quickly learned that online social media is a much more fluid job. Like I could work on it maybe at 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. and I didn't need to fit it into like a 9 to 5 like I was doing. Again, I had to figure that out, through trial and error. We ended up keeping the days and adding another one because we enjoyed being able to maybe want to spend alone time. Whereas, we weren't getting that when I was on the ranch all the time with the kids. And so all of these pieces and all of this quote unquote balance fell into place, honestly, through trial and error and just figuring it out. I don't think I could have ever planned it and then implemented the plan and had it work without just kind of moving pieces as we went along.
I think that's so important though, too, because a lot of the times people just see somebody else's journey online and they're like, oh, these are the steps they've taken. That must be the set of steps that I need to take in order to get there as well. And it is totally not cookie cutter. And something that I say a lot is there is no work-life balance that people need to be like, oh, they're doing this much work and this much life. That must be the balance I need to have too. And that is not true. And I don't even say that anymore. I say it's just life balance. What's the right life balance for you? And I'm like about to cough. I woke up with this head cold and I don't know where it came from. This is hay season, folks. Like we cut our hay last week and we got it baled the other day. And now I'm just like, it's all over the place. This is real life. But anyway, so yeah, it's just life balance. And you have to figure out what is your right life balance. What hats do you want to wear? When do you need to wear them? And I think that that's so cool that you're like, we had to test it out. Like we didn't just make this plan and that's what we're going to make work. Like we were flexible, we were open-minded, we tested this, it didn't work, so we're going to try something new. And we just kept finding, where we needed to work that kink out. And we finally found the right groove. And I think that's so important for people to understand. And coincidentally, it seems like every person that I've had on the interview or, had an interview with on this podcast has been an entrepreneur. But what advice would you give to someone who was like, I don't really want to be an entrepreneur. I want to keep doing my 9 to 5, but I still need to find that right balance for me. I mean, what kind of advice would you give for them if they're like, I still want to build a brand on social media. I want to have this side hustle or side gig, or this is something I enjoy doing and I do want to make money, but I don't have really a big desire to leave my job just yet.
I think that is really important that you brought up this conversation. Tara and I were at a podcasting conference last month, and someone asked the question, kind of the exact same thing. Like, I'm not there. It was a room full of a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of social media people, a lot of podcasting people. And so every other question was about, how can I do this? How can I scale this? How can I grow this? How can I start this? There was questions like, I want to be an opportunity. I don't even know what to be. How do I figure out what to be? And so, it was all these go-getting essentially questions. And someone was brave enough to kind of ask the opposite, and I thought the person who answered it on stage did such a good job that in some of the most successful businesses, it is because of a very successful second person and third person and fourth person and fifth person. And if you don't want to be the number one person, you don't want to be the main entrepreneur, you don't want to be the CEO, you don't want to be all those things, that's okay. We need all types of the people in businesses. And I would say the same thing about growing a business. If you want to just have a small Etsy shop that doesn't have to turn into your main thing where you buy a warehouse and you employ 6 people, great. I think you just need to have realistic conversations with yourself. Again, I think it honestly goes back to self-awareness and being strong enough to know, am I pursuing the right thing because that is what is the right fit for our family and my goals as a business owner? Am I pursuing something because I feel that other people want me to grow it, or I feel like I should grow it because other people are? And I really think it just comes down to honing in on your desires, your wants, your strengths, and then really staying rooted in that so that you put those blinders on and you're not doing things in business or your life because you should, could, all of those adjectives. It's like, no, this is what works for our family right now. This is what works for my business right now. And I don't need to get caught up in doing anything different than that.
That's big. And I really want to asterisk this because you don't have to do the grind. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to set all these goals. I love setting goals, but that's because that's what I want to do. And there's so much pressure. And I think so many people sharing their entrepreneur journey that it's like, crap, I'm missing the boat. I've got FOMO, or maybe that's the only way for me to be happy is if I do that thing too. And I just want to reiterate, you don't have to do that. There is so much power and it's not for everyone. There's a huge need for workers. There's a huge need for stability. There's a huge need for people who stay in the same job for 20 years. And if that's you, I want to encourage you to stay there. And I think it was Mike Rowe who shared a video the other day about we need people who are going to do the stuff that isn't necessarily ideal, like the plumbers, the electricians who are, standing on a light pole in the middle of a storm trying to restore power. We need people who are going to do the dirty jobs. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I had that same conversation with my husband. I wanted to be an entrepreneur because I wanted to be the one calling the shots. Even when I was a little kid, everybody asked me, what do you want to do? I want to be the one in charge. I want to be the one who makes the decisions. I want to be the one who takes full credit. I want to be the one who has the flexibility and the freedom to do it the way that I want to do it. That's just me. And my husband was like, that scares the crap out of me. I have no desire to do that at all. He wants to punch in, do his job, and punch back out and leave work where it is. He has no desire to run a business. He has no desire to call the shots. He wants to go in and do the work and be done with it. And that is totally fine. But we have a little bit of a different perspective though. So when you talked a little bit earlier, your husband, when you mentioned that he was a little reserved, is this really what we're after? But so just being aware of saying here's the benefits, here's the potential obstacles, but we're fully aware of what these scenarios could look like. I think that's the important piece. But yeah, to just, like I said, reiterate, like there is nothing wrong, and it is absolutely important. And there is so much value in people who stick around and who have a legitimate steady income and a job. And I think there's power in that. So there's no guilt or pressure from us to pursue entrepreneurship, because that's not the case.
No, and I definitely think we're at a point in society where we have glamorized entrepreneurship too. And so people think they want that or think they should want that. And I don't know if I mean, it's hard. Like you said, there's a lot of stress with it. I think you do have to be the right type of personality or have a team around you to make some of those, like scaling a business is hard. For me personally, starting things is not hard. It's very exciting for me. It's the scaling, growing, maintaining. And I don't think we think about that as much. And I remember hearing a podcast actually where she was talking about how she kind of got caught up in the same thing. I think she was like a copywriter or a graphic designer or something. And she was talking about how she used to bring, she would outsource. So she would bring in people to do her jobs, and she was growing and she was scaling. She had a team of like 5 to 10 or whatever it was. It was fairly large. And then she said, I realized I would actually be more financially better off if I would scale back, not outsource. I would have more, constructive hours. I wouldn't be as stressed, and I would actually make more money. And so that's what she did. She said it was really, really hard to end up firing those people in those team, but she was able to, kind of hone her craft. She upped her prices a little bit because she was like a specialized. She had enough demand for it. And she's like, it was drastic difference. She's like, I'm not stressed. I have more time and I'm making more money. So sometimes the idea that bigger is better is more money is not always true. Sometimes you can find your groove, like in a medium paced business or a small paced business. And it's the same thing when I think about our ranch. Like there's a sweet spot of where you can be financially viable with our operation of how many cows we run and how much you have to spend when it comes to inputs and outputs and all those things. And so just having that mentality that you need to grow and be the biggest to be the best and make the most money isn't always true.
Oh, that's gold. That is gold, because you have to factor in the season of life that you're in as well. Like if you would have asked me a year and a half ago if I wanted to be an entrepreneur full time, I would have been like, that scares the crap out of me. But I also wasn't planning on having baby number two. And so now that I have baby number two in this particular season of my life, this is what works for me. But in 5 years, when she heads off to school, I may get that itch again to go work for somebody else and have amazing benefits and get that company truck back and go out and work with farmers one-on-one again and really just have that face-to-face with people versus working in my house in front of a computer all day. So I mean, I may get that itch back, and that is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. That doesn't mean I'm a failure at being an entrepreneur. That just means in this particular season of my life, this is what works for me now.
I am so glad you brought this up, because I also think in society, we have groomed people to think that if they change their mind or they make changes in their life or career or business, like shame on them. They did it because they failed. They did it because they did something they weren't supposed to do. And I do not prescribe to that belief system. Like you said, I literally believe to the idea that there are seasons and seasons serve us. I may go back into pharmacy. Like you said, I may eventually do that. I don't know. I might get tired of being this like hustle grind of entrepreneurship. And like you said, just want to go back to being a pharmacist. It is not a big deal. It is not a big deal that I started a direct to consumer beef business and stopped it so that I could start sharing about our family and create a personal brand. It is not a big deal that I started a YouTube and now I am not on YouTube anymore. Like we do not need to pressure ourselves into thinking that whatever we start has to be the thing we do for 5 to 10 years. And honestly, we're probably the best business owner and CEO if we start and then iterate, right? So if you started and are maybe doing the exact same thing you did, maybe you're not growing or getting to a point of where you could be better because you are making shifts and changes. Like I just believe stagnancy isn't the best. And I don't think we should feel bad about starting and trialing until you find what fits for you in the season. And I don't think we should be bad about changing things based off seasons in our life.
Yeah, I mean, evolve was like my key word for 2022. And I took that so literally. Part of me resents me for it. But the other part of me is like, I learned so much because I just allowed myself to evolve. Like, I gave myself grace. Like, I used to be very stubborn. Like, I'm a typical middle child. I'm a Taurus. Like, I'm like the stereotype when it comes to, no, this is the way it's going to be. And to allow myself to grow in those moments and change my mind in real time. Like, I challenged myself to do that. And that was harder than heck. Like, I even caught myself mid argument with my husband one day. And I'm like, no, this is the way that we said we were going to do it. So we're going to do it this way. And he's like, but this factor changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in my head, like, I had done so much work with myself of like, okay, now is your opportunity. You can either stand your ground or you can admit that you may be wrong. Oh, big gasp, right? Like, you may actually be outdated at this moment. And that's really hard for me to admit. And that sense of pride, like, things change. My plan didn't evolve. Like, I'm challenging myself. Now I have the opportunity to admit things weren't the way that I thought they were going to be. And I can grow with this. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, our ego can get in the way of a lot of things. And I think the more in tune we are with like what our ego is saying to us and why we're making things around our ego, the lot simpler life gets, honestly, because you can kind of be like, no, I think you just see the bigger pictures better. And you honestly see, I think, pass forward a lot easier too when you're kind of putting your ego aside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see you doing so many cool things on social media. And so I'm curious, since we're talking about evolving, what kinds of things are you able to share of, like, what's in the works for you? Like, are you going through a process of change right now? Or are you in the process of like steady as best right now? Like, I'm smooth sailing, things are going great for me, and I don't have a plan right now. And that's totally fine too, just to say, like, if you're like in a pause moment of just like, I'm just gonna be, like, that's cool too. But like, where are you at? Are you in the growth stage, or are you in the I'm cool with where I'm at stage?
No, I'm definitely in a transition stage. It's been like a weird kind of, not like full year for me, but it's definitely a transition period where I'll look back and see that like pieces have moved for us on the operation as well as myself and my business. This is the first year I haven't ever done any of my rural rooted retreats, which was like a really big change for me. Again, you can only do so much. You can only be spread so thin, and you can only give your time and attention to so many things. And so that was something that was really, really hard for me to let go, but I had to step away from those retreats in order to create space for me to put other things into my life that I wanted to do. My main focus right now really is our podcast, Discover Ag. And then we are doing a bunch of behind the scenes work we would love to pair that with a visual like film docuseries to accompany the podcast. And so that has been taking a lot of my time, money, and honestly, like financial support as well. And that's something that a lot of people doesn't see because it is so behind the scenes. And so I do think people kind of like wonder like what is maybe kind of like what I replaced Rural Rooted with or why I'm not doing those anymore. Brand partnerships is still a big focus for us because we do make a lot of money for our family that way. And then we're kind of in a pivotal change in our operation as well, which is kind of playing a role in like me changing things online too. We are technically a first generation operation. And so going back to what you talked about in the very beginning, like diversifying income streams, we are fairly diversified on our operations. My husband has an AI business, which again, going back to like the month of May, I have to structure my personal business a lot different than I do other months because May, my husband is actually gone and off the ranch doing AI stuff. And so it's just those pieces, they just move. You have to be fluid in business in that way. But we background calves, we have our registered herd, and then we have our cow-calf herd, and we also do like heifer development. And so we have all these income streams that honestly we needed to survive as a first generation operation. But my husband's ultimate goal is really to have a very developed registered herd and sale. And so a lot of pieces are, changing for that. And I think my involvement in our operation will be kind of in that area in our registered operation more than like any of the other sectors. And so I'm starting to fill actually some more roles offline and do some more things for our operation from the stance of registered. And so it's definitely a very weird year for me trying to figure out how to like change some of those things, feel good about the changes, and then make the changes work. And then also I am starting over in a lot of things. I feel like I'm at the beginning of building and scaling where I was for a couple of years. I wasn't doing that. I was in the maintenance phase. And so it's kind of weird and hard for me to be like back at the beginning of like pitching and starting and scrambling and hustling. But yeah, it's exciting because my personality is definitely built for creation more than I am for stabilization.
I love that you shared that. That's very vulnerable as well, because from an outsider perspective, if I'm watching you online, I surely would think that, oh, she did this years ago. She's stable. She's where she's at now. Like she's got it figured out. And so to hear that you're taking time to reset and reflect and kind of just like, is this where I want to be right now? What moves do I need to be making right now? And I'm also in a transition. Like that's cool that you're sharing that because I didn't, like you said just a second ago, like us changing our mind, like what does that say about us? Does that mean that we failed? Does that mean that we didn't know what we were doing originally? Like, does that mean that we were wrong at first, which I don't want to admit to anybody? Like, I want everyone to know that I'm right all the time. And if I let somebody know that I changed my mind, like, that's embarrassing almost. And
Mhm.
so, but that's not the case, it sounds like with you. It sounds like this is a strategic and intentional time with you of like, I want to reevaluate where things are. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's really cool. And that kind of helps us feel a little bit more human and a little bit more relatable and a little bit more like, oh, I don't have to have it all figured out all the time. Like, I can change my mind. I can pause and reflect on things.
No, I think when you're building things, you have to be reflecting and pausing and changing. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm very comfortable and I'm happy that you think it is, vulnerable of me to share that. And so I hope people who listening feel, maybe comfortable in making changes for themselves or maybe feel a little bit more brave to make changes for themselves based off of that too. But no, we're all evolving. I mean, I started social media with the goal to, well, I started it for the direct to consumer beef business. I mean, it's always been income stream for our family, right? But the ultimate goal for me has always been to make our operation financially viable enough that it could provide for my husband and and I wouldn't have to, at the very beginning, it was, I wouldn't have to work the pharmacy job. Our operation could provide for us. And we're getting closer and closer to that. And so I'm trying to fit how social media, I love the creativity. I love, I didn't grow up being like you, an entrepreneur wanting to be the boss of things or sell things. I'm learning about entrepreneurship now. I am self-taught and I would say very new at it. It's kind of ingrained in me, but also I feel like it's not ingrained in me. I do feel like I have to work at it in some things. So I don't think I want to leave that now that I have made this entrepreneurship a part of me. I don't think I could ever really step away from it. My husband always says like, you'll never stop wanting to like grow or like scale, start things essentially now that you've gotten a taste of it. And I think he's right. And so I'm big on looking where you want to be in 5 and 10 years and thinking like, is what I'm doing now putting me in that position? Is what I'm doing now what I even want to be doing? And for me, I came to that point where I was like, okay, some of the things I'm doing are not what I want to be doing in 5 years. And what I do want to be doing, I need to be making those shifts and those changes so that it works with where we want our operation to be and the pieces that I want to keep with social media, in 5 years and how I want to be showing up and sharing. And so, yeah, I think I'll probably be in a transition phase for the whole rest of the year and maybe even next year until I really hone in on what those pieces look like for me in the future.
That's cool to hear too, because I think I've always put this pressure on myself because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I always felt like, no, I have to go get the real job. I have to go get the health insurance. I have to go do these things. That's just my personal journey. And I always felt like I couldn't leave because of these really, shiny golden handcuffs, right? And so I always felt like held back. And me being 33 years old and just now being a full-time entrepreneur, I feel like I'm behind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just my own mindset and my own journey. Then, like you shared, like I'm just now getting into it, and I didn't really have a desire to do it, but this is just kind of where I found myself being. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just working through those fears and those mindsets that you have, and just really figuring out what do you want.
Mm-hmm.
Remove everybody else's opinion, remove everybody else's journey. What do you want?
Yeah. And I think that's a skill and a muscle. The more you exercise, the easier it gets. I think people will be like, oh, how do you do that? And it's like, once you start doing it and you get a taste of what living life for yourself and the core people that mean the most to it, whether that is a spouse or a parent or a child, like the opinions that matter that you need to take into account. Once you start living life for those people and yourself, it gets really, really easy to start tuning the other people out and like turning down that volume. but it is definitely a muscle you have to exercise to be able to do it. Some people cannot just do that right away. Some people can. But if you're one of those people that's like, how, I want to get to that point where I don't care what other people think or that their opinion doesn't sway my decisions, you might not get there in one day. It might be a slow progression where you just have to slowly start turning down the volume. And eventually all you hear is the opinions that matter.
Yeah. And I think EQ, emotional intelligence, comes a lot more natural to other people, and being able to like, oh, this is why I feel this way. And I'm looking at other people and I'm acknowledging their emotions and the things that they're going through. And I think that's where the self-help, self-development books come in handy, is to not only get started, but to sharpen that skill and build that muscle strength. But if somebody has never entertained, like reading a self-development book or looking at their personal development, and they've strictly focused on the professional side of things, where would you recommend they start? Like, do you have a book or a podcast or something, a type of person that they should seek out to like begin that journey? And if it's something that they're resistant to, what kind of advice do you have?
Yeah. So since people are listening to this, they're probably podcast people, I'm going to guess. There is a podcast I'm looking it up right now because I want to just make sure I attach his name to it, because I think there's a couple. It's called Quote of the Day, but I think there's a couple titled that. And so I want to make sure you guys get the right one. It's Quote of the Day with Sean Croxton. Monday through Friday, he has an episode, and they are usually 10 minutes or less. So they're very quick hits. And they are all centered around personal development, motivation, mental, like just what he honestly does is takes sound bites from very famous people's speeches they give, and he just replays them on his podcast. So usually it's like, 6 minutes of someone speaking. You could go look up the whole speech on YouTube, but essentially he pulls out pivotal moments that he wants to talk about. Very good way to start your day. I did that for a very, very long time to kind of, like I said, teach me entrepreneurship, give me motivation, give me different perspectives, leadership ideas and skills, and all of that. So I would highly recommend that if you're a podcast person. There are a couple self-help, like I'm a big fan of daily readers. Again, I guess I don't carve out the time. I know I could, but I don't, to read like chapter books very much. And so the idea of, on April 29th, April 30th, like that every single day there is just 1 or 2 paragraphs to read is easy for me to make an actual habit, instead of being like, I'm going to buy this self-help book and then it sits there and I never read it. I can feasibly fit in a 5-minute read every single morning. And so there are a couple. I'm right now in John Maxwell. He has a leadership one right now, which I really, really love. I have found at first I was like, I don't really know about it being focused on leadership. Like I don't have a huge team under me. I do outsource and like have like, I guess, quote unquote employees, just from outsources, but I just didn't know how the leadership would fit in, but I am an absolute fan of it. I find so many nuggets in that book. Almost every single day there is a line written that I'm like, oh, that is so good. And so you could start with the John Maxwell Daily Reader. I've also read the Daily Reader I did last year. Crap, I'm forgetting the name now. Oh gosh.
John Maxwell, I'm a big fan. Like that's actually how I got into coaching. Is I went down and went to his international certification conference and became a John Maxwell, well, it's Maxwell Leadership now, certified coach and trainer. And the amount of just aha moments that I could have in one single minute is ridiculous. Like that's a big suggestion for me as well, is if somebody is looking for self-awareness, self-development, it's called leadership in most of what he writes, but it really is just figuring out how to be better, both as a human and as a friend and as an employee. I mean, there's so many good golden nuggets.
I can't find this one, you guys. I'm sorry.
Well, we can get the link and put it in the show notes afterwards.
Yeah, let's do that. I can email you and let you know what it is. And I really enjoyed it last year. I thought it was really well done. And so I guess that's kind of what I do, are those daily readers, self-help in that way.
Well, this has been so good. I loved our conversation today. And I just want to say thank you for joining us. If someone wants to follow along with you and watch your journey or reach out to you for, suggestions or work with you, where can they find you?
Yep. So again, if you're listening to this in podcast, you're probably a podcast person. So if you want to hop over and follow us on our Discover Ag podcast. We would love that. It is not self-help or personal development. What it is we take trending topics in the ag and food space and we really break them down. So we take things that are like making national news, or pretty controversial, that are written by, New York Times, Washington Post, people living in the city who have opinions about farm and food that maybe aren't giving all the nuance and conversations and having the discussion that those headlines deserve. And so we do that every single Thursday. If you want to hop over there, it's really fun. I think it's as, entertaining as educational. So other than that, my personal Instagram is kind of my house. I am on like Twitter and I'm on LinkedIn as well. But if you want to follow like our operation and me very personally, it would be my Instagram, Natalie Kovarik. And then if you want to follow me more professionally, it would be my LinkedIn, which is Natalie Kovarik as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the AgriMinds podcast. And I will make sure to put all the places that they can follow along with you in the show notes.
Thank you.